At my wedding rehearsal dinner, my mother-in-law stood up to make a toast. She tapped her glass, smiled at me, and said, "Tomorrow isn't about love. It's about security. And you bring nothing to the table." The room fell silent. My fiancé just laughed and said, "Don't worry, babe. She's always like this." The next morning, I found a prenup on my dresser and a note that read, "Sign it, or the ceremony's off. We're not marrying for charity." I'm writing this now 6 months after everything went down. I haven't talked to Drew since, but Ellen still tries to contact me. I never respond. If you knew what she did, you wouldn't either. This story starts a little over a year ago. I was 28, living in Charleston, South Carolina. I managed a small boutique shop downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved it. I worked hard. Paid my bills. Never asked anyone for help. Drew walked in one afternoon to buy a gift for his sister's birthday. He seemed unsure, so I helped him pick out something simple and classic. He came back the next day to say thank you and ask me out for coffee. I said yes. He was good-looking, polite, made me laugh. We clicked. It was easy. A few months in, I started to notice some things. He talked about his mom a lot. At first, I thought he just came from a close family. Then I met her. Ellen. I'll never forget it. She invited me to brunch at this country club in Mount Pleasant. I was so nervous, I wore a dress I couldn't afford and heels that tore up my feet. She barely looked at me. When she did, she asked where I went to school, then nodded when I said community college like I'd confirmed a bad suspicion. The rest of the brunch she just talked about Drew's ex, how she went to Wake Forest and did charity work in Morocco. I smiled. I didn't say much. But inside, I knew I was being tested. And I'd already failed. Drew proposed 5 months later. He did it at a rooftop bar in Savannah. I said yes. I really did love him, and I thought maybe things with Ellen would get better once we were married. They didn't. She took over the wedding planning. I had zero say in the venue, the food, or even the guest list. My family got 4 tables. Hers got 12. She told me that was just proportional. Every time I pushed back, Drew told me to let it go. She just wants things to be perfect, he'd say. Or, she's paying for it, just let her feel included. But she wasn't including me. She was excluding me from my own wedding. Then came the rehearsal dinner. It was the night before the wedding. The place was this upscale golf club with white linens and crystal glasses. I'd barely eaten all day, trying to fit into my dress. I was tired, stressed, and trying to hold it all together. Dinner ended, and people started making toasts. My dad went first. He choked up, talking about how proud he was. My sister said something short and sweet, then hugged me tight. Then Ellen stood up. She tapped her wine glass with a fork. The room went quiet. She smiled, but not the warm kind. The kind where the corners of her mouth curl up but her eyes stay cold. She said, "Tomorrow isn't about love. It's about security. And you bring nothing to the table." Silence. Real silence. My aunt dropped her fork. My cousin looked down at his plate. My mom's jaw tightened. I looked at Drew. He laughed. He actually laughed. Put his arm around me and said, "Don't worry, babe. She's always like this." No one else laughed. Not one person. I forced a smile. Nodded like it was okay. But it wasn't. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling in the hotel room, listening to Drew snore, wondering what the hell I was doing. Then came the final blow. The next morning, I woke up and found a manila envelope on the dresser. Inside was a prenup. On top of it, there was a note in Ellen's handwriting. "Sign it, or the ceremony's off. We're not marrying for charity." That was it. Not a call. Not a conversation. Just a demand and a threat. I looked at Drew. He was already dressed, checking his phone. I asked, "You knew about this?" He shrugged. "It's standard. Nothing personal. You don't have anything to lose anyway, right?" I felt like I was falling. Like the floor had dropped out from under me. That's when I decided. I wasn't signing it. I wasn't marrying him. I was going to walk away. But not quietly. I was going to make them regret ever thinking I was nothing. So I didn't sign the prenup. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I told Drew I needed a minute to think, took the envelope, and walked out of the hotel room with it in my purse. What he didn't know was that I wasn't coming back. I went straight to my sister's room. She was still in her pajamas, sitting on the edge of her bed scrolling through her phone. I tossed the envelope at her. She opened it, read the note, and said, "What the hell is this?" I told her everything. The toast. The prenup. The way Drew laughed like it was some big joke. She stood up. "You're not marrying him." "I know," I said. "But I want to make sure I leave a scar." That's when the plan came together. Here's what you need to know. I may not have had a fancy degree or a trust fund, but I wasn't dumb. I'd saved every receipt, every email, every wedding-related document from the past 9 months. I'd paid out of pocket for half the vendors, even though Ellen promised reimbursement. I'd taken out a personal loan for the honeymoon, because Drew's credit was tied up in investments. And I had the texts to prove it. Texts from Drew saying, "Can you just book it? I'll pay you back after the wedding." I had copies of the contracts. The down payments I'd made. The deposits that went into his mother's name. And now, I had a motive. That afternoon, instead of going to the ceremony, I went to the venue early. I told the coordinator I needed to do a walkthrough before the guests arrived. She knew who I was. She let me in. I asked to use the mic for a quick sound check. And I recorded something. It was short. Only about 2 minutes. Just me, speaking calmly into the mic. I told the truth. I said how Ellen had humiliated me in front of my family. How Drew let it happen. How they blindsided me with a prenup the morning of the wedding. How I wasn't going to marry into a family that treated people like dirt. Then I left. Before I walked out the back door, I handed a USB to the DJ with the label, "Bride's Message, play before first dance." He nodded and said, "You got it." I never looked back. By the time Drew realized I was gone, it was too late. They had already seated the guests. Everyone was waiting. My family was confused but didn't ask questions. My mom and sister knew. They smiled and sat through the whole thing. Drew texted me once, "Where are you?" I didn't reply. 10 minutes after the scheduled first dance, the DJ played my recording. My sister said Ellen's face turned the color of raw meat. Drew stood up and tried to rush the booth, but it was too late. Everyone heard it. Every word. Guests started walking out. One of Drew's uncles actually clapped. Ellen tried to spin it. Said I had a breakdown. That I was unstable. But people had questions. And I had answers. I emailed every vendor. Sent them copies of contracts, payment records, and texts. Asked them to remove my name from everything tied to the wedding. Half of them hadn't been paid yet anyway, so they were more than willing to talk. Within 24 hours, I had a lawyer. Turns out, trying to force someone to sign a prenup the morning of their wedding, under threat, isn't exactly solid ground in court. Especially when that person paid for half the wedding. We filed a civil suit. I sued Drew and Ellen for breach of verbal agreement and emotional distress. My lawyer was sharp and aggressive. He loved the drama. A few months later, while we were still in court, Ellen had the nerve to send me a message through her assistant, "Let's not drag this out. We're willing to settle for a modest amount, considering the embarrassment caused. I didn't settle. I pushed harder. And while all of that was happening, something else came to light. While the lawsuit was going on, I got a call from a woman named Marissa. She said she'd been engaged to Drew before me. I'd never heard of her. She found me through the story getting shared around Charleston circles. Someone had leaked the audio from the wedding. Apparently, a bartender recorded the whole thing on his phone and it made its way online. Local gossip pages were eating it up. Even vendors were sharing it as a warning about problem clients. Marissa said, "I need to talk to you. In person. It's about Drew and Ellen." I was skeptical, but I met her at a coffee shop just outside the city. She was tall, maybe mid-30s, looked tired in the way people do when they've been through something. And she had stories. Turns out, Marissa had been through nearly the exact same thing 2 years before me. Same whirlwind romance. Same love bombing. Same "we don't need to worry about money" attitude from Drew. Same sudden demands from Ellen. Right before their wedding, Marissa was hit with a prenup she hadn't expected. She walked, too, but she didn't fight it. She said, "I thought I was alone. I thought I was the problem." But there was more. Drew had drained a joint account they'd opened together. Promised her he'd use it for wedding expenses. Then, when she backed out, he kept the money. Said she'd walked away from it. She sued. But Ellen's lawyers dragged it out so long, Marissa gave up. She lost thousands. My case wasn't just about money anymore. It was a pattern. I called my lawyer and told him everything. He subpoenaed Drew's bank records and emails. What we found confirmed it. There were multiple wire transfers from women, labeled for wedding deposits, shared honeymoon, and even apartment furniture. Drew and Ellen had done this before. At least twice. They were running some kind of long con. Not exactly legal, but just sneaky enough to avoid jail. Use charm to get women emotionally invested, convince them to pay up front, then squeeze them dry or scare them off. They didn't care about marriage. They cared about image, control, and money. When my lawyer saw the pattern, he switched our claim from breach of agreement to fraud. And that changed everything. The court ordered Drew to produce a list of all financial exchanges tied to previous engagements. He tried to fight it. Claimed it was irrelevant. But we had proof that they'd used my money, just like Marissa's, to build a life they never intended to share. Now we had 2 plaintiffs. Then 3. Turns out, Drew had been engaged 3 times before me. Only one wedding actually happened, briefly. That one ended in a quick annulment, and the woman had signed a prenup. She never saw a dime. I reached out to her, too. She sent me a single message: "You're doing what I was too scared to do. Don't stop." We didn't stop. My lawyer built the case brick by brick. Every dollar I spent. Every lie Drew told. Every promise made and broken. I was still working full-time, barely sleeping. My sister helped me organize everything. We made spreadsheets. Timelines. Witness lists. And just when we thought we were ready to go to trial, something happened. Ellen's husband, Drew's dad, called me. Ellen's husband, Richard, was a quiet man. The kind who blended into the background at parties and didn't speak unless spoken to. I'd only met him a few times. Always polite, but distant. I figured he just didn't care. But now he was calling me directly. "Can we talk?" he asked. Privately. I agreed, but I brought my sister with me. We met him at a small diner outside Charleston, the kind with vinyl booths and burnt coffee. He was already sitting there when we walked in, wearing a windbreaker and looking older than I remembered. When I sat down, he slid a thick manila folder across the table. Inside were papers. Bank statements. Letters. Photos. "I didn't know," he said. "Not at first. But when you walked away from the wedding, I started paying attention. Turns out, Ellen had been keeping secrets from her own husband, too. Richard showed me wire transfers from Ellen's private account to Drew's. Large sums. Right after each of Drew's engagements. Right after the women left. She paid him to end things quietly, Richard said. Every time. Told him it was better to let them go than bring more shame to the family. I felt sick. She wasn't just encouraging Drew. She was financing him. Every time a woman backed out, she'd give Drew money. To keep him afloat. To keep her hands clean. And Drew didn't care, he was playing both sides. She's protecting something, Richard added. Or hiding it. We kept digging. And what we found changed everything. Ellen wasn't rich. Not really. She came from old money, sure, but most of it was gone. The trust fund was dry. The properties were mortgaged. The charity work? A front. She'd been funneling money from her fake nonprofit into Drew's accounts, using wedding funds as cover. She was broke. And desperate. And I was about to expose it all. My lawyer filed for a forensic audit. We had enough to convince the judge. Ellen's accounts were frozen. The nonprofit was investigated. IRS got involved. Suddenly, this wasn't just about a broken wedding anymore. It was about fraud, misappropriation, wire transfers, tax evasion. They were in deep. And then, Ellen snapped. She showed up at my boutique. I hadn't seen her since the wedding. She walked in like she owned the place, like nothing had happened. You need to stop, she said, calm but cold. You've made your point. I stood behind the counter and stared at her. You humiliated me, I said. You called me nothing. I said what everyone else was thinking, she replied. You were never one of us. You're right, I told her. I'm better. She leaned in, eyes sharp. You think you won. But all you did was destroy your own future. No one will touch you after this. I smiled. We'll see. She left. That same night, my lawyer got a call. Ellen had offered a private settlement. A big one. She wanted everything sealed. No media. No court. No audit. But I wasn't done yet. I told my lawyer no. No settlement. No silence. No walking away like I was scared of her. I wanted it public. Every lie. Every dollar. Every time she humiliated me, or Drew made me feel small. I wanted everyone to know what kind of people they really were. The court date was set. It wasn't a fast trial. It dragged for weeks. They tried everything. Claimed I was bitter. That I was using Drew for money. That I was mentally unstable. Ellen even had someone follow me for 2 days and try to take photos of me at work like she was building a case for harassment. But none of it stuck. My lawyer put everything on the table. The texts, the contracts, the audio from the wedding, the testimonies from the other women Drew had conned. And then we showed the money trail. The fake charity. The payments Ellen made to Drew. The way they hid it in fake invoices and ghost vendors. It all came crashing down. The judge called it one of the most deliberate and emotionally manipulative patterns he had ever seen in a civil case. Ellen lost her nonprofit. The state pressed charges for fraud and misuse of funds. IRS slapped her with back taxes and penalties that made her cry in court. Her accounts were frozen, and her assets seized. Drew? He lost everything, too. The court ordered him to repay every woman he conned, me, Marissa, the others. It wasn't just financial. The judge called his actions calculated emotional abuse. He was banned from opening joint financial accounts for 10 years without court approval. Richard divorced Ellen a week after the ruling. Quietly. Without drama. He moved into a condo downtown and sent me a thank you note. I should have left her years ago, he wrote. You gave me the reason. And me? I moved out of Charleston. I used the settlement to open my own store in Asheville. Something small, but mine. My sister moved with me. We're roommates again, just like old times, and honestly, I'm happier now than I ever was with Drew. But I won't lie to you. I made mistakes too. I ignored the red flags. I laughed off the first insults. I let Drew convince me that love meant silence, and that family meant swallowing every bitter pill. I wanted to be chosen so badly, I forgot to choose myself. But not anymore. Now, I don't wait for people to respect me. I make them. So yeah, maybe Ellen was right. Maybe I didn't bring anything to their table. So I took the whole damn table with me. And I burned it.